You might have, turn the microphone on.
Esteemed council members, thank you for your time. I'm a farmer. I'm a veteran. My name's Alan France, and I'm from Rocky Ford, Colorado, and I'm also on the school board. What I want to talk about is safety and security of our food. I have family that grows the watermelons and the cantaloupes that y'all enjoy so much up here on the Front Range. And we now have to test our surface water before we can put it on our fruits and vegetables. Never had to do that before. But we have to test before we irrigate to ensure that concentrations of salts and disease-causing microbes are not at dangerous levels. Dilution of these contaminants used to be the norm. There used to be enough fresh water coming in from the mountains that these contaminants weren't a problem. Now, with several cities buying and drying and exchanging the fresh water out of Pueblo Reservoir before it ever reaches the Arkansas River, is causing these levels to rise, and it will eventually have a profound negative effect on the fruit and vegetable growers of the valley. And some of those with the salts, it's going to happen also with hay growers, corn growers. The more water you guys buy, the less fresh water gets released out of Pueblo Reservoir, and the Fountain Creek brings down all the nasty water. So it just doesn't have a chance to get diluted. And dilution is the solution for pollution. If we can't delete it, at some point farmers in the valley are not going to be able to use that water. So we've got to stop somewhere. We can't keep taking water out of the river before it ever gets in the river. And that's what happens when you guys buy water and exchange that water right out of Pueblo Reservoir before we get a chance to use it down the valley. So I urge you to vote no on this, because it's a spiraling effect. The more you buy, the more you use, the more waste you produce, and the less dilution that we can get with fresh water coming out of the reservoir. So that's all I have to say, but it's going to be a dangerous spiral if big cities just keep buying the water and taking the fresh water out and drinking it up here and leaving us with Fountain Creek residue to farm with. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Avila?
Yes, someone from utilities here. This is my question from utilities and water, is like, what percentage of it do we use on agriculture, the water out of the Colorado River, and for the urban area here in Colorado Springs?
Abby's going to come up and answer that.
Yep. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Abby Ortega, General Manager for Infrastructure and Resource Planning, Colorado Springs Utilities. I'm not sure I fully understand your question. We get, as a percentage of water, about 50% of our water first use comes from the Colorado River. About 20% right now comes from exchange water, which is what Mr. France was alluding to, is some of that exchange that happens to move the water from its current location in the lower Arkansas Valley up to Pueblo Reservoir. I will say right now we operate those exchanges from Colorado Canal upstream as part of our portfolio. But from a percentage piece with your question, I'm not sure I fully understand what you were asking.
I think that we use a certain percentage of the water that we have available to us in the state, all right, or in the southern Colorado. And I just want to know what percentage of that, all the water allocation that we get from CSU, what percent of that, not just CSU, but what percent of the water goes to the city, urban area, and what percent of this water goes to the agricultural area? I've heard before like 83,
I think
27.
Generally in the state of Colorado, they say from the Division of Water Resources that about 87% of that water is used in ag, and about 7% is used in the urban environment, and the rest is in industrial.
Okay, what's the rest then? So
Industrial.
I'm not like President Helms, man, he could do that math in his head like that.
If 87% is used in ag, and then that other 13% is split between municipal and industrial uses.
Okay, so 87% is used in agriculture.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I know, just for our audience too, I was discussing with our CEO, utilities will speak, after the citizens' comments, utilities is going to speak to try to address some of those particular issues for both us and for you. Jack, you will have 6 minutes. Welcome.
Thanks, Mr. President. My name is Jack Goble. Is that too loud? Okay. My name is Jack Goble, and I'm a sixth-generation resident of Bent County and live on the same land that my great-great-great-grandfather homesteaded 116 years ago. The dirt dugout that they lived in is still in our family ranch today, even if it has a few more tumbleweeds and rattlesnakes in it. To help support my passion for raising cattle and kids, I'm the general manager of the Lower Arkansas Valley Water Conservancy District. Our district was voted into existence in 2002 to conserve, protect, and enhance the water resources of the Lower Arkansas Valley. We represent 5 counties spanning from Pueblo to the Kansas state line, and for 150 years, the foundation of our economy in the Lower Valley has been irrigated agriculture, and that is still true today. We have to look no further than Crowley County to see firsthand the destructive effects that occur when water is extracted from farming communities to enable cities to grow. Prime food-growing farmland was forever dried up and now only grows weeds and blowing dirt. Most of the water removed from Crowley County farms is now used here in Colorado Springs. So when you turn your shower on tomorrow morning or pour yourself a glass of water tonight, take a moment to appreciate the fact that a portion of that water used to not only grow food, but once grew and sustained our communities in the Lower Ark Valley. Now, we've learned a lot since then, and in recent years, Colorado Springs Utilities has taken steps in the right direction to do better, even if, in my opinion, your PR departments may have oversold some of those changes. That being said, the reality of today is that utility staff has the very difficult responsibility of finding and acquiring 34,000 acre-feet of additional water supply per year to support the build-out of what's already within Colorado Springs city limits. So that's a shortfall that we have right now. For those of you that don't speak water, that's over 11 billion gallons of new water per year. Being a realist and working in the water space, I'm convinced, and the folks from the Western Slope agree with me, that no more water will come from them. If it does, so be it, but I highly doubt it. So that equates to permanently drying up 50,000 to 60,000 more acres of farmland in the Lower Arkansas Valley, just to support what's already in Colorado Springs city limits now. This will be a monumental task in itself and may not even be possible. Assuming it's possible in that quantity, I think is dangerous. And that is to supply, like I said, to supply what's already been annexed into the city. Even more water will be required and more farmland would need to be dried up for any new land that's annexed into the city. What happens if Colorado Springs is unable to acquire this much water? I suspect some very difficult decisions would have to be made by those sitting in your seats at that time, even more difficult than the decision before you today. Maybe then Colorado Springs will finally come to the conclusion that it has to live within its water means. With me here today are 5 growers of food from the Lower Arkansas Valley. You may call them farmers. Each of them comes from multi-generational farming families that for over a century have grown food for our country. And it's very possible that each of us here today, and even our ancestors that have long since passed, have fed our families food that came from the fields of these gentlemen sitting back here with me. Most, if not all of us, somewhere in our family history are descendants of farmers. You might contend that your ancestors were smart to move on to other pursuits, and I probably wouldn't argue with you. That being said, I'm thankful that my ancestors and those of these gentlemen that came with me today were too stubborn to give up on a sometimes impossible existence, because they and their neighbors worked so hard so that the rest of us can fill our baskets at the grocery store and not even get our hands dirty. Many of you may remember the longtime radio broadcaster Paul Harvey. I used to listen to Mr. Harvey's radio show as a kid, usually when I was on the business end of a shovel irrigating crops. I remember one 100-plus degree day in July. I was walking a cornfield with my shovel, making sure the water was running down each furrow. It was hot, humid, the bugs were biting, and I was hurrying back to the edge of the field where my pickup was parked to get a drink of water, wondering why would anybody ever want to do this for a living? And as I came out of the corn stalks, I heard Paul Harvey show the rest of the story as it was just starting on the radio. He was reciting a speech called "So God Made a Farmer," that later became popular again as it was used in a 2013 Super Bowl commercial. I'd encourage all of you to go listen to his rendition. For the sake of time today, I will just read the last paragraph for you. God said, "I need somebody who'll plow deep and straight and not cut corners. Somebody to seed, weed, feed, breed, rake and disc and plow and plant and tie the fleece and strain the milk and replenish the self-feeder and finish a hard week's work with a 5-mile drive to church. Somebody who would bail a family together with the soft, strong bonds of sharing, who would laugh and then sigh and then reply with smiling eyes when his son says he wants to spend his life doing what dad does. So God made a farmer." After listening to this, it all made sense as I was standing on the edge of that field. It's a big responsibility to grow food for our country, but it's also one of the most noble lives to live. I commend you for being willing to sit in these chairs and consider the many implications of your decisions. But please know that your vote on this annexation today will set the course for not only the future of your citizens in Colorado Springs and your neighbors to the east, but also for your neighbors in the lower Arkansas Valley. And that future may not yield all the water that Colorado Springs has already committed to their citizens. And I ask you to vote no today. Thank you.
And we have a comment from Councilmember Hingham.
Thank you, Mr. Goble, for coming up and driving up from Benton County today. And I appreciate you bringing a much bigger perspective to this really important decision that we're making today. So I have 2 questions for you. One, maybe you could start with, we heard earlier about water quality and impacts on growing melons and food and so forth. If you could elucidate a little bit more about how this decision impacts that. And then the second is, depending on how this vote goes today, what does that do to Colorado Springs Utilities' relationship with the Arkansas Valley and future water rights that we might try to obtain?
Thank you. So yeah, to address the question on water quality, that's becoming a bigger and bigger concern, as Mr. France said earlier this morning. We at the district are doing a lot of work to try to address that. But our biggest concern, which we have not sorted out yet, and will likely, hopefully we can sort it out outside of the courtroom, but it may end up in water court with your recent exchange cases of moving water from Benton County, which is 100 miles east of Pueblo and the reservoir that you pull water out of. The concern is that when you remove clean water from a river system, now please understand that the water that is being bought today as we speak in Benton County under the Fort Lyon Canal is 100 miles east of Pueblo. There's not a pipeline to bring that water here. And as you look at water quality from Pueblo to the Kansas state line, it gets worse as you go. And that's the way it's always been, and it still is. But that water that you're buying is not the water that you're using up here. You pull the water either across the mountain through a Otero pump station or from Pueblo Reservoir up one of 2 pipes. And so it doesn't take a genius to put that together, that if you keep taking clean water out of a system that would have otherwise flown downstream, you're going to degrade the water quality. So that's a concern, a major concern that we have, Kansas has. We've had conversations with Kansas on this and what's this look like in the future. And so that's something that still needs to be addressed, and hopefully we can do that through cooperation. The relationship, yeah. So for some time now, since I've been general manager of the district, I've been meeting with utilities leadership, staff, and like the people a lot. We seem to get along well. The progress has been slow. I've asked for some sort of an agreement similar to what we have with the city of Aurora, which says this is the amount of water you get, this is how you get it, and here's the mitigation to offset the negative impacts to us. And I'm hopeful we can still move that way. One of the biggest pieces I'd like out of that is a cap on the amount of water that is removed from the valley. Because like Mr. France mentioned earlier this morning, and I could talk for hours about it, it's kind of a domino effect. You start removing water, the water quality degrades. The people that don't want to sell, suffer the consequences and their yields drop and so on and so forth. I mean, it's a domino effect. So I'm hopeful that we can come to some sort of an agreement, because ultimately, and this is what I've told your staff, utility staff, if we can come to some sort of agreement, we won't be in your way every time you turn around and try to buy water. If we don't have an agreement, we will. I mean, that's what we're put here to do. The taxpayers from Pueblo to Kansas pay us to do that. And so I'm hopeful that we can come to an agreement so we can work together to stop, other speculation and whatnot. And so we'll see how that goes. With regard to the vote today, it'll be pretty disheartening to know that you're already looking for 11 billion gallons of water that, there's arguments that some may come from the West Slope. I doubt it. That is still a shortfall, and so this would just add on to the top of that, and it's very concerning. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Lineweaver.
Yes, you talked about conservation, and you introduced that as that, but yet in Colorado, over 80% of our water is used by agriculture, and yet most of it is still being used with just flood techniques, irrigation, and stuff like that. And a lot of farms haven't really upgraded even to a sprinkler system, let alone a drip system. Less than 1%, I think, of every farm in Colorado is on a drip system, which is so much more efficient. And I know our utilities, when we do water stuff, we usually come in and offer offsetting the cost of a farm going to a drip system, which truly is conservation, in return for accessing the corners of their lot, of the land or whatever it is. So I think there's a lot of great efforts, but there doesn't seem to be from the farming community, because you own the water, you get to decide how you use it. And if you want to flood a field, that's fine, but you can't go and tell me that you're being you're a conservationist if you think flooding the field is an appropriate way to use a resource. So I just want to challenge that thinking, and I'd like to see more cooperative opportunities of investment in trying to use the water that we have more efficiently. Again, you control 80% of all of our water. Cities is less than 10. Industry is the other part. So how do you respond to that? Why haven't we seen more farms adopt to more conservation efforts?
Sure. So we operate what's called a Rule 10 plan. I won't go into the details, but it's basically a plan whenever farmers install a sprinkler, there's a potential that sprinkler will allow the crops to consume more of the water and less will go back in return flows. And so we've seen significant growth when it comes to sprinklers, maybe 8% a year or something of growth. We've got over 300 sprinklers in our plan, so we're moving in that direction. It can become cost prohibitive, particularly with drip. You mentioned drip. I mean, that is very, very cost prohibitive. You're only going to see that with, high value crops. It just doesn't pencil out and doesn't make sense financially. With regard to water quantity and this farce that you install a sprinkler and you all of a sudden add water to the system. There's this thing called the Arkansas River Compact between the state of Colorado and Kansas that requires, other compacts are different around the state, but this one's similar to the Colorado River that gets so much press. If you put in some sort of improvement, Kansas doesn't care, and it says in the compact they don't care. But whatever you had historically for return flows, those have to stay there. So we can develop all we want, but they at the state line need to see the same amount of flow. So there's no water savings. And that's according, to the compact, and that's a pretty hard thing to crack. So I think I know there are efforts to conserve, but unfortunately in our basin, the law of the river kind of really doesn't incentivize efficient moves like that.
Well, I think that's kind of the thing that I think needs to have more conversation around, is how our water laws work and how a community can best use the water. I think that's a big missing piece to this whole conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome, sir, and you'll have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hello, my name is Dr. Michael Bartolo, and I'm from Rocky Ford, Colorado. When I spoke to you last time, I came to you from the perspective as a farmer, and today I want to come to you as an agricultural research scientist. I spent 32 years of my career working for Colorado State University Agricultural Experiment Station, looking for crop water use efficiency, water quality, and every technical aspects of water use. Notably, we have on our facility in Rocky Ford, we have some of the most sophisticated ways of determining crop water use. Some of the best equipment, we use drones, satellites, all kinds of things, anything you can imagine. Notably, during that time, I also had the opportunity and helpfully to host some of the people from Colorado Springs Utilities to discuss some of our research trials and some of the findings we had. I was compelled to sit through this meeting once again because of the false narrative, unfortunately, I've been hearing from officials from Colorado Springs Utilities, and feared that it might have given you a false sense of you have an ample water supply, and what you are doing to acquire more water in the valley is nowhere near the atrocities that were committed in the past. I want to say that narrative is ultimately false. First, to call what Colorado Springs is doing in the valley a water sharing program is misleading and disingenuous. And to say that oftentimes I hear the word, it's a win-win situation, that is just plain wrong. Conceptually, it's very simple. In order for you, Colorado Springs, to get water, you have to dry up farms. In a real and technically measured environment, there is no water savings by putting up sprinklers, and there is no magical crop that is going to free up water so you can get extra water. That's just not happening. We're all in a water deficit. The ability to supply water for this particular development or any other is contingent on you to buy and dry. That's simple. I'll reiterate what I said at the last meeting, and I even mean it more now. You ran out of your moral water supply decades ago. Adding more insult to the injury, and we heard about this a little bit earlier, is the water quality aspect of it. The water rights that Colorado Springs is legally entitled to use is laden with salts and heavily contaminated with your stormwater and your sewage discharge. This has been well documented with Colorado Springs Utilities and U.S. Geological Survey. There's over 20 publications validating that. It would cost you millions to transport that water and treat it. Instead, you exchange those rights for pure water higher in the system. And what that does is leave those pollutants even more concentrated for the remaining water users. How in the world is that a win-win solution? How is that? And we've constantly brought that up for Colorado Springs Utilities and others, and it's kind of been discarded. It's kind of been thrown by oh, it's not bad. There's not a big difference. It is. I've been studying this for 30 years, folks. I realize you don't know me, but the next time Utilities is before you, instead of watching all these promotional videos, you might want to ask them these simple questions. Ask them how many acres of productive farm ground are actually going to be dried up. Next, they're always talking about, we're just taking the efficiencies. We're just taking the efficiencies. I've been studying efficiencies for 30 years. Ask them how these efficiencies, where they are, and exactly how they're measured and quantified. Ask them, they say there's no damage to Bent County. There's no damage to the valley. So they must have done an economic impact analysis, correct? So ask them, what did their economic analysis reveal as far as the loss of additional 10, 20, or 30,000 acres of farmland mean to the lower valley? And then ask them about the water quality. What's incredibly troubling is that all these questions that I just put before you, all of them could have been answered beforehand, before the cost of producing those promotional videos that we're so accustomed to see. I hope you're not just relying on that for your information. You talked about trust, developing trust. No wonder the trust. People in the valley see through that water sharing program. They see through these promotional videos. They know the truth. It's not going to fool them. If we want to go forward, we need to develop some trust. It's not a secret. The majority of your constituents, I have many friends and relatives, I'm in tune with every public poll that's been out there, are sick of what unbridled growth has done to this once beautiful city. In a 2022 survey, the Colorado Department of Agriculture found that over 90% of the citizens of this state do not want to see any more farms dried up to support urban growth. I want to make this clear. That's exactly what you're doing here now. And that will result in the desecrating our farms, our communities, and the very future of our families and our heritage. I hope you know what heritage means. I really hope you understand what that means. And that's for something your citizens don't remotely want. It's going to be a tremendous challenge to solve the problems, all the water issues that this basin faces. And it's going to need some honest and frank talks. Travis, I think you're a straightforward and honest guy. I hope you're up to that. But we really need to sit down and cut out all this other BS that's going on. Please. Above all, we need trust. And right now, there is no trust. There is no trust because of that. It's very discouraging to see that. And then you have reckless annexations like this, annexations that don't be needed. And
so I'm going to have to thank you for your comments, but we do have Councilmember Risley may have a question for you.
Thanks, Mr. President. I would just like somebody from Colorado Springs Utilities to address the allegations that were made here.
You want to do it now or at the end?
Yeah, I think now is appropriate only because of the accusations that it is.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Barbado, the Officer of System Planning and Projects at Colorado Springs Utilities. And over the last several days and even today, you're hearing a lot of conversations and we believe to be misinformation. You're hearing that they believe they're hearing misinformation for us, but we have worked very hard with the farmers in the lower Arkansas to build that trust. And we do not believe that all of the relationships we have down in the lower arc, that would be the same sediment. So I think this is a good time for me to talk about what we're doing down in the lower arc and even address some of the comments that you heard. So we have integrated resource plans, and as part of those resource plans, there are many different ways that we're going to be meeting the water needs of our community. It's not just agricultural transfers from the lower Arc Basin. We are looking at conservation. That's a very big part of our plan. We're reusing our water, so that includes the indirect potable reuse. We also are adding storage. Mr. Lineweber, you asked at the last hearing about Continental Hoosier, and so we're adding about 4,000 acres with raising up that reservoir. So this is not the only source of supply that we're working on. This is part of our plan, and we do believe there to be some win-wins. And I'm going to use that word because I do believe that there's some efficiencies, not only for the farmers, based on the question we had from Mr. Lineweber previously, but really for our community to work with the farmers, help them gain those efficiencies, and then use that water for municipal use. So as we look at annexations, they do not change how we plan for our future water needs, but they do increase the water that we do need. And so you've heard the number 34,000 acre feet of water needed for our community for our city limits. That is water that we still need to acquire. But every time we add annexation, we will have to go out and acquire different water or have more efficiencies within our system and look for some of those opportunities, such as conservation. So we take a lot of pride in our Arkansas Water Sharing Program, and this, I'm just going to state this again because I think I've heard this multiple times. This is just one portion of the new supplies that we need to meet our long-term plan. And our Water Sharing Program emphasizes collaboration among the in-basin users rather than competition for water, which is really where we're working to gain those efficiencies with the farmers. We work directly with the farmers, and again, you'll see several of our partners here, but there are several that we spoke to before this meeting that want to have further conversations with us, and they do have trust in us. And we really are looking for the most beneficial way to meet both of our needs. There's been some conversation about how we dry up farms. We do work with farmers on those efficiencies. With the center pivot program that we have, there is a portion of the farm at the corners where there is some dry up. Farmers are still able to farm and have some production on that. And we're estimating that to be about 20 to 28% of that land, that total acres. So I really wanted to get that straight, that there's a portion, but it's not complete dry up. That's not our goal, is to do complete dry up of the farms. You have heard some comments on the water quality in the lower Arkansas Valley, and we definitely understand the concerns around that. We take that very seriously. And we actively participate in a regional resource planning group, and I know Mr. Goble with his district is part of that, as well as Mike Bartolo. And so we are having active conversations with them on how we mitigate the risk on the water quality. That is not our intention. We do not want to go down there and have injury to their farming operations and ultimately into Kansas. So we are working very hard and at the table in that area. We also work very closely with Jack Goble's group. I know he has reached out to many of you, and he's with the Lower Arkansas Valley Water Conservancy District. We have been meeting with Jack very routinely and had a lot of conversations. It has been, like he mentioned, a slow process, but we want to keep that communication open and look for those opportunities. We actually have a meeting with him next week that's been scheduled to further these conversations. So we're looking for how we partner with them and build that trust. And so I do have one more thing I want to say, that through our agricultural program, when we do not use all the water within our system that we have purchased, we are actually leasing that back to farmers. And so I think that's a very important point. This last year, we leased back 20,000 acre feet of water back to the farmers. And this is that mutual benefit of using it when we need it, but then we want to give that back at a lower dollar. So we do believe we're building those relationships, and we just really want to still continue building that trust with the Lower Arkansas. If there's any questions, I'll take them. Michelle.
I see Councilmember Talarico.
Thank you, President Helms. Just a quick clarification. Could you say one more time how many acre feet Utilities is leasing back on average? You mentioned a number, and I just wanted to make sure I wrote that down.
Yes, 20,000 acre feet. And our demand for our community this last 5 years, it was 69,720. So that gives you an idea of order of magnitude of how much we lease back to the farmers.
Thank you.
Council, Randy, can I?
Yes.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit too, I mean, I think you're spot on. We're going to figure out how to continue to work and partner there. And I think there is a lot of conversations. When you get into water, it's going to be a hot topic for the state of Colorado for here in the foreseeable future. As farming technology changes, I mean, I've seen it change since I was a kid as well. I think there is going to be things that can even change, and working with Kansas and other entities, they all see that too. Runoff control. Everything from chemicals used, what type of chemicals are actually being used in farming technology, how to control some of that, because we see that too. Luckily, a lot of our water is at first use, so we don't have the issues that some of the downstream, municipalities have, through Colorado all the way through Kansas. So, some of the flood irrigation controls may be the conversations we have with Kansas is how do we look for some better partnership and collaboration of how it's used so it's actually soaked into the agricultural product versus, seen and run off. So I think there's a lot of things we can do and partner, but you definitely got my word that we will do everything we can to try to figure out a win. Last time I was down there, even talking about the silt, the build up there, because you lose capacity in your streams, your ditch canals in there, and how do we work with even our storm waters to make sure we even have, so you've got a partner in us and we will figure out how to move forward. But I think it's going to have to take collaboration. I think as we take a look at what our community's needs are and what is your community needs and how do we find those win-wins, I agree with Lisa. I do like that term because I've never seen an outcome that we can't find some beneficial understanding on both parties, and I hope we can here. But I know we're going to have a lot more conversation with this, but I am proud of our team, and we don't go down there and take anybody's water. You know, a lot of that is through negotiations with that owner, but we also know that impacts the rest of the community. Who sells the agriculture, who transports it, who moves it. So it does have to be a community conversation, but we do try to work with those individuals of what their needs are at the time. So we'll continue to make as best as we can decisions with that. So I know it's a hot topic. I mean, I've seen it my entire life. You know, when it gets into farms, you know, small farms moving into large industrial type, you know, loses its, and a lot of that product leaves too. So I think, you know, the answer in Arkansas Valley, we're going to be a part of it, but it's probably even more than that. Whether you're getting into industrial level type of farm use versus local, a lot of that ain't sold. So I've seen that, you know, change over time too. So I think we can help a lot with that. So.
Councilmember Hingham.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And I would just like to say I really value and appreciate that we're having this conversation, and I hear the lack of trust. I want to say that I have a tremendous amount of trust in our utilities staff, in Travis's CEO and Lisa, Abby, folks in water. And I also trust you, Mike and Jack, and I do believe that through collaboration and conversation, what you are doing is, I think you're elevating and really making it what we're all aware of, that this is a challenge that not just our city, but our whole region, the entire West, is facing around water and the future and food and housing, and these things all compete with one another, and we have to be able to sit down and figure out solutions that really truly will work for everyone, and it's not easy. So I appreciate you coming very much. Appreciate what you had to say, Lisa, and just appreciate that we're having the conversation. And I do trust that we will continue to build those relationships and find the right solutions. Thank you. Thank you.
So up next is Jared Gardner. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Jared Gardner, and I represent the Lower Arkansas Valley Water Conservancy District, the Catlin Canal Company, and I also represent my own multi-generational family farm in Rocky Ford, as well as a co-owner of a local business that provides goods and services to farmers in Southeast Colorado. I'm here today to request consideration of a no vote for annexation to this council. Decisions made by municipalities have economic impacts that ripple through rural communities that those elected officials do not see or sometimes are unaware of. Recently, the city of Aurora purchased about 22% of the Catlin Canal in one transaction. As a capitalist and a water owner, I have no problem with a property owner entering the market and ultimately discovering a price at which they'll be willing to trade their land and water for. What I do have a problem with are cities and municipalities that are embracing unmitigated growth and making it my problem many, many miles away. Municipalities draw from their tens or hundreds of thousands of citizens and businesses through increased taxes, fees, or bonds to fund buying water efforts to feed their growth. What would seem to be a small incremental increase in municipal cost to a household or business, multiplied thousands and thousands of times, gives municipalities overwhelming power in the land and water marketplace. In the Aurora purchase, they effectively tripled the value of Catlin land and water in a single day. In the ultra-competitive finite resource market of water, that just means prices will never subside. The main problem with this equation is that it is impossible to cash flow the purchase of farmland to actually farm at these new higher prices, thus eliminating all but investors and speculators from this market. In this new water investor-driven marketplace, you will essentially kill off the ability for any young men or women to purchase farmland to actually farm. It is becoming increasingly difficult for the retiring farmer to seek to sell their property without entertaining the idea of selling it for the value of the water. Eventually, without a new generation of farmers to return to our rural communities and the retiring farmers having few options except to sell to investors and municipalities, our towns and rural communities will die. A vote to annex property into your city is essentially a vote to kill my hometown. Colorado Springs sometimes Irresponsible growth has already created problems procuring water for your current population and unimproved land within your current city limits. It is demoralizing for myself and people in my community to see that elected officials in other communities seem to unknowingly hold an axe over our heads with every vote to increase the size of their cities. I will finish with a quote from someone whose political ideology is completely different than mine, but the quote fits. Growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of the cancer cell. Edward Abbey. Thank you.
Chris Tomke. Chris. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, President Helms, City Council. My name is Chris Tomke, and I'm a farmer from Rocky Ford. My family has farmed in the Arkansas Valley for generations. In 2002, I started my own farm. For anyone involved in agriculture or municipal water delivery, 2002 is a year that will never be forgotten. The driest year in recorded history. The runoff from the snowpack was virtually zero. The rain never came. These problems were compounded by extreme heat and winds that seemed to never stop. Farmers planted their crops just to see them wither and die. Cities' water supplies were stretched to critical levels. Wildfires burned out of control. Native flows on the Arkansas River dwindled to a trickle. It's a year that changed everything. A complete and total failure of our water supply. Agriculture producers' lives were changed forever. Cities realized just how vulnerable they were and began scrambling for more water rights. From this point forward, nothing would ever be the same. As a farmer on the Arkansas River, my cropping plans are based on one thing and one thing only, the water supply. I diligently watch the snowpack data and reservoir levels. I plant only what I know I can keep irrigated. Sure, I'd love to plant every acre every year. That's just not the case. I only plant what I know I can take care of. Many years this means leaving the land fallow. On a dry year, to plant additional acres would only take away from what I already have. Use this as an analogy for your city. To add more, you will be taking away from what you already have. According to census data, your city has grown around 30% since 2002. Is it ever enough? Where does it end? Another 30% in the next 20 years? There has to come a point where you say enough is enough. This is not sustainable. The Arkansas is already stretched to its breaking point. How much more can be asked of our river? Your neighbors downstream have already given all that they can give. The water quality is already to a point where at times it's not even suitable to irrigate crops. Water is taken out upstream as pure clean mountain water and is then returned to us in the form of effluent. While irrigating, we have to wear rubber gloves to protect ourselves from the water that is coming down our river. Imagine the adverse effects this has on our rich and diverse wildlife as well. There's a proverb that says, those who fail to study history are doomed to repeat it. There will be more years like 2002 in the future. Will your city be able to withstand them? I urge you to protect it. Excuse me. You have a beautiful and vibrant city. I urge you to protect it.
Thank you. Ryan Hemphill. Good afternoon, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys for the opportunity. My name is Ryan Hemphill. I'm a operator of an irrigated farm and ranch near McClave, Colorado, and that's about 100 miles east of Pueblo. Ironically enough, I'm also a professional water resources engineer, and I don't mention that very often because when I do, I seem to get harassed. People come to me and they ask me questions about water and where's all the water and why do we not have enough water? And you know, it's interesting, if I had a gallon of water for every time I've talked about water, or I've wished for more water, or I've spoken about more water, or I've had neighbors that have asked about water, I wouldn't need any more water. I'd have enough water and somebody else could take the rest of it. But the reality is that we live in a place, and we both share this same context, where our water supply is unreliable. This project, the Karman Line Annexation, I don't know if your city needs more development. I don't know if you need more housing or not. You have some gentlemen here that say you do. You have some gentlemen here that said you don't need any more housing. Growth, I mean, it can be pretty good, right? It's dang sure tempting. A lot of good things can come from growth, but there's a lot of pitfalls that can come from it too. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you don't need more housing, but I can talk to you about water and I can talk to you about food because I know a lot about both of those. A couple of really important numbers. 3,000 acres is what would be required to be dried up to be able to provide enough water supply for a project like this. You may have enough water supply in your portfolio currently to meet that with a bit of a buffer. I don't know. Your people probably know more about it, but I will say that if you vote yes on this, you will be looking for more water. I know that because you have people that are in the valley looking for water right now. The second number I want you to pay attention to is 1,000. That 3,000 acres in my context, which we have an irrigated farm and we run cattle, we use regenerative farming and regenerative grazing practices. That 3,000 acres feeds the equivalent of 1,000 people every single day that farm is actively working. So if that's taken away, that's 1,000 mouths that don't get fed immediately. I'm going to leave you, I don't have much time left, but I'm going to leave you with a quote, and that quote is from former Congressman Pat Roberts, and it says, "Show me a nation that cannot feed itself, and I will show you a nation in chaos. There is no greater threat to national security than food security." Thank you.
Thank you. EP Henderson.